Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I'm now calling to order the meeting, and I would invite everyone to rise and join Council in singing O Canada. In the circumstances, you did very well, and you should applaud yourselves. They seem to have piped it through one tiny little speaker right here, rather than through the hall. Madam Clerk, I believe we have regrets only from Councillor Robinson. And Councillor, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I'll ask you to confirm or change the minutes of the previous council meetings. Councillor Duddick? Councillor Duddick moves the minutes as given. I need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Knoll, all in favor? Opposed, if any? The minutes are adopted. Now, Council, tonight we have a terrific presentation from the Oakville Community Foundation and their new CEO, Wendy Ranella, and it's going to update us on their periodic vital signs report. And welcome, Ms. Ranella. And,
Thank you, Mayor.
And we're looking forward to your information.
Thank you. Are you loading the presentation for me?
Yeah,
okay. All right. Well, just begin before we get the presentation up and say thank you for hosting us here tonight, and thank you to the mayor and councillors for all your participation with the Vital Signs report. We were on the mayor's show, Oakville Matters, discussing the report a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to thank Councillor Lichchinia as well as Councillor Giddings, who attended the launch, and we held it in Councillor Knoll's facility. So it was a very successful event. So are we going to load up?
Yes. Which one is it?
Yes. Fabulous.
Forward, back.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So this is our fourth Vital Signs report, and the last one was done in 2011, and it's the result of consultations across this community. We met with over 50 different groups, as well as the town participated, and we had Sheridan College involved and hosting a seminar that helped us develop the main themes of this report. So to begin, what you should know about the Oakville Community Foundation is we're the 10th largest out of 191 community foundations in Canada, and that's based on assets under management. We have over $100 million in assets under management, so we hit way above our belt in terms of per capita assets under management with our 187,000 people. And that's because we're a wealthy and caring community. So Oakville benefits in many ways from being a very wealthy community. But what we should also recognize and be mindful of is it is a community of contrasts, which is the title of our report for 2015. We're not all wealthy. We're not all haves. We don't all come from one suburb of Oakville. We're a community of contrasts, and Money Sense magazine ranked us the 4th wealthiest community in Canada, the 4th richest based on property values, incomes, as well as luxury car sales. So you have to drive your luxury car all the way to Canmore to find a wealthier community. We are the wealthiest community in Halton and in Ontario. And it's something that benefits us, but we also, again, have to be mindful. So coming from our report, there were 4 key areas. One we call the equity gap. Second is affordable housing. Third is diversity and inclusion. And the 4th is mental health. And I invite you, I believe that my colleague Sarah helped distribute that report to all the councillors, and they're available to everyone here as well, if you'd like to get them from the Community Foundation. So the equity gap actually refers to what we call the precarious class, those who are underemployed on part-time or contract work, who are very much at risk and the most at risk of falling into poverty. So when we look at Oakville, and we can look at our incomes, on average in Oakville, a household makes $160,000 a year. And that is a very impressive amount. And the median is $100,000, and that is 41% higher than the provincial average. Yet at the other end of the spectrum, in terms of those families that make less than $30,000 a year, it's more than 1 in 10 families in our community. 11.4% of Oakville households earn less than $30,000, and that's higher than the provincial average of 10.9%. So there's your first contrast. On average, we have a greater number of households in the higher and in the lower income brackets in our community than the Ontario average. And we have the highest and lowest incomes in Halton region. One of the contributing factors to this equity gap is the high cost of living. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the cost of housing in our community, which is our second pillar. Housing is considered affordable if 30% of your income is spent on shelter and you have enough for your daily needs. In Oakville, we have the highest amount of people spending most on shelter in this region. 44% of renters and 20% of homeowners are spending more on shelter than the rest of the community, who are spending 30% or less. Back in January, the median price of a house sale was $694,000 in Oakville. By September, it rose to $720,000. In terms of affordable housing, the cutoff is $328,000. So in Oakville, only 4, not 40, 4% of our housing is affordable. And this contrasts with the rest of the region. In Burlington, 54% of the housing sold there last year was affordable, and in Milton, it was 40%. So we have significantly lower affordable housing available. And what happens is this backups the chain of shelter availability in our community. So private rents are at their highest in the GTHA in Oakville, and we have a vacancy rate that is very low for private rentals. And at the same time, we have very high waiting lists for subsidized housing. Some families are waiting up to 5 years on average for subsidized housing. So we have a backup in terms of affordable housing in this community. The third pillar is one that we can all celebrate. In Canada, it's on diversity and inclusion. In Canada, the stats are that 20% of Canadians are immigrants and 19% are a visible minority. Well, we punch way above the belt on this. In Oakville, almost a third of residents are immigrants, and 24%, almost 1 in 4, are from a visible minority, and that has been changing consistently since 2011. So as we grow, we're becoming more diverse and changing. And the final pillar that I want to talk to you about is mental health, and that's the only one that's been a carryover since 2011. So what's happening, as we probably all recognize, is there's a lot more discussion and a lot more people seeking treatments and public discourse on mental health, championed by a lot of people in our community. And what we're finding is while people are seeking more treatment, what's happening is assessment times are getting longer. So we have children waiting up to 2 years to have a psychological assessment. And we know that 70% of all mental illness can be detected and addressed in childhood and youth. So it's something that we're very much looking at. So I'm going to take you to my next slide. So how the foundation is looking at these issues, and this is a bridge. Those are the pillars. Everybody see that image? The bridge and the pillars. So what we're trying to do with these pillars is we're going to be building a bridge between those two communities of contrast in Oakville, between the have and the have-not, the low income and the high income, kind of the north and the south in a figurative way. We'll leave the actual building of bridges to town council in the region. And of course, we're looking at our new community and our old community, our changing community. So we're looking for bridge builders in this community that we can align ourselves with. And what we're also talking about in 2015 is we're launching Vital Signs 2.0. And I know the mayor understands 2.0. We're becoming much more interactive. In 2011, we did our report and we shared it with the community. We wanted you to engage in discussions, and we made some strategic investments through our granting for charities around these key pillars. But this year, we're doing something a little different. We're actually going to become more engaged on it. We have a wonderful relationship with Sheridan College, where they're helping us to do research around these issues, looking at the inventory of philanthropy that we have in this community, what charities are doing in our community around these pillars, and be able to identify where there's gaps and where there is actually duplication. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's a food access and security review that's going on right now. And for those of you who aren't aware, Halton Region is involved, the Halton what is it called? I always call it the HRPT, but it's the Halton Poverty Roundtable, as well as Food for Life. And what they found is that there's 112 agencies delivering food access in Halton Region alone, and there's 38 in Oakville. And there's a lot of overlap, but there's also gaps. We have some families that still have to go to multiple facilities to get one healthy meal. So we know we can do better with philanthropy. So our focus is actually to build better philanthropy, and you'll see the foundation talking about this as we move forward. We're launching a research project with Sheridan to talk about more innovative and creative philanthropy in our community. And we have some wonderful programs. I think some of you are familiar with Homeward Bound Halton, and we can spend 10 minutes talking about that. And of course, the town is involved with the youth partnership, the leadership program through the Y that is helping kids who are absentee from school actually get an education and certification, get job training in the sports and recreation field. So these are programs that are client-based, and they involve collaboration between multiple partners. And what we're looking at right now, moving forward as a foundation, is how can we utilize all those key resources in our community to build a better philanthropy system, one that actually addresses the needs of the clients, because they have multiple needs. Our whole system is set up as a charitable delivery system to provide one type of funding. And the executives of those organizations are focused on fundraising. We think there's a lot of money and funds and grants in this community that we can get it right and be a model for the rest of the province and the rest of the country. So what we're looking to council is to continue the partnership with us as we move forward and build these projects out. We're looking to you to continue your leadership and partnership. We're going to be trying to facilitate, coordinate, and accelerate collaborative solutions in this regard, and we'd really welcome the participation of council. It's actually the continued participation of council. So thank you very much for your time, and I have 13 seconds left. Good night.
Congratulations, and thank you for the donation of 11 seconds.
You're welcome.
Council, do you have questions for the presenter? Councillor Giddings.
Thank you very much for coming out. I was hoping you'd bring some popcorn like you provided last time.
That's up to Jeff.
Okay.
Councillor Noel.
Thank you so much for what you're doing for the community and for your new position. Just out of curiosity, for people that may be watching this, do you have a website that people could go to for further information?
Yes, thank you for that opportunity.
Shameless plug
yes,
time.
I appreciate that. It's www.theocf, it stands for Oakville Community Foundation.org. Thank you.
Councillor Noel.
Thanks. Wendy, one of the things that I know that a lot of organizations struggle with is operating funds. They tend to be able to get funding through Trillium and other organizations for project-based funding, but they really suffer when it comes to operating funds, so they can keep the doors open, pay the phone bills, the rent, that sort of thing between projects. Is this something that OCF will look at more carefully going forward? Because I know that I don't think there's a charity in town that isn't frustrated with this particular problem that they focus on. Even donors have a difficult time grasping the need for operating versus project-based funding.
Well, it's important that you raise that because it was actually something we addressed as part of our Vital Signs launch. When you think about the equity gap, one of the places where people returning to the workforce or new Canadians are finding jobs is in the charitable not-for-profit sector. And so we ourselves had grants that were going out that weren't for operating. So you're basically telling charities, which are service providers, that you can't hire a coach, a counselor, or a support worker, or a caseworker in terms of your charitable delivery. And so we've changed our granting. We've actually indicated very publicly that we will now be offering operating grants up to $10,000 for people. We're very concerned that this sector is important for job creation, and we shouldn't be trying to stifle it. There's been a demonization of charitable administration and operating for too long, and people don't recognize and it's important actually, and that's part of the discussion about building more effective philanthropy. So thank you for raising that, and we will be continuing that discussion. We're actually looking at a funders roundtable because there's a dream in our strategic plan which talks about a one-window funding portal which all funders will be part of, and then the charities don't have to make the multiple applications. So we're looking at that from a long-term perspective and hoping to have a number of funders sitting around together offering grants to charities.
I'm very encouraged by that response, and thank you for what you do for this community.
You're very welcome.
Just to follow up, Councillor Knoll is the chair of the Health and Social Services Committee at Halton Region, and it's always a news bulletin to some people that municipal services in Oakville are delivered in a two-tier structure, and most of the things that we're concerned about in Vital Signs are dealt with at the regional level in the committee that Councillor Knoll chairs there. And a bit of good news that you may be able to work with is in the forthcoming budget for the region of Halton, we are increasing the amount in the Halton Community Investment Fund, which could partner with you if you start now, I think. And we're increasing that significantly. I think it's going to be about a 66 or 70% increase in that fund because we've found that demand has far outstripped the level that we've been operating it at. So I hope that perhaps you prompted me to tell you that by your one portal vision. Now would be the time to start those discussions with us at that venue.
And we have started that discussion with the new commissioner, Alex Sarchuk. So we've had those conversations. So thank you. We'll look forward to talking to the region. Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Good night.
All right, now, Council, the orange in the audience is from a group of residents who have decided to orange the world and end violence against women and girls. And they've set themselves 16 days of activism in the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women from 25th of November to the 10th of December. And thanks to Councillor Elder for bringing all of us together. It's my pleasure to announce that we've issued a proclamation, which I'll now read, and perhaps we already took a photo together, so we don't have to do that again. Whereas the town of Oakville recognizes that no level of violence is acceptable, and the elimination of violence against women must be an absolute priority, and whereas we stand in solidarity with abused women and support them, and whereas victims must not be blamed for the violence committed against them, and whereas community partnerships are important to promoting and supporting the efforts of providing safe shelter for abused women and their children, and whereas governments and institutions have a primary responsibility to demonstrate leadership and provide resources to achieve equality and to end violence, now therefore I, Rob Burton, Mayor of the town of Oakville, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2015 as Violence Against Women Month in the town of Oakville and encourage everyone to support Unite's campaign.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, Council, we have 6 delightful items in public presentations, which is to say that the town in various venues has won 6 awards, and there's no better place to showcase the good work of our staff and council in winning these awards than right here at a council meeting. So the first one is the ICLEI, let me make sure I do this right. The town has achieved an amazing accomplishment in our climate change strategy. The town of Oakville is one of 16 Canadian municipalities participating in the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities program, which has the charming acronym of BARC, B-A-R-C, however. The town recently reached milestone 4 that reflects significant progress in the implementation of our strategy to mitigate and adapt to climate change. The strategy represents the work of over 20 staff members from 15 or more departments who reviewed 80 town plans and policies to identify gaps and opportunities related to increasing the town's resilience to a changing climate. As a result, Oakville can be seen as a national municipal leader in climate change commitment and action. And for that, we received this beautiful certificate. Now, but wait, there's more. The town has also demonstrated its leadership in greenhouse gas emission reduction. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities and ICLEI, Partners for Climate Protection, is focused on municipalities developing and implementing actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, also through a milestone process. The town began the process in 2005, and by August 2015, the town achieved milestones 1 through 5. Milestone achievements include setting reduction targets, implementing actions, and achieving reductions of corporate greenhouse gas emissions. As one of only 29 municipalities in Canada achieving milestones 4 and 5, and there are more than 2,000 municipalities in Canada, to give you some perspective on that, achieving milestones 4 and 5 is indicative of our leadership in energy and greenhouse gas emissions management. And that award looks like this. And I don't know. There's my Johnny Carson moment. I hope that works. Now, the next award that it's my delight to draw your attention to will be presented by Dorothy St. George, who's going to present the International Economic Development Council Gold Award for the 2014 Annual Economic Development Report. Ms. St. George.
Thank you, Mayor Barton, and good evening, members of council. I have a very brief presentation to outline 3 awards, in fact, awarded to the town for 2015 and for the work completed by the Economic Development Department. So the first award is a gold award from the International Economic Development Council. They are located in the United States, and this work is for our annual report. The annual report is provided to Council, providing information on activities for the prior year, as well as our competitive position. You can find this both in print copy and as of this year, it's in a flip book format on our website. And all of this work was led by Rebecca Storms in our office. The second award is also from the International Economic Development Council, and it was for the work undertaken in developing an Innovation Awards program. We heard from our businesses in Oakville that they're doing a lot of innovative work, and we wanted to recognize the excellence, and we undertook to provide a program and an event that recognized that excellence. As you may recall, it was on a very stormy, snowy night last November, unlike this week. And we still had a good turnout. And the success of this event has led to the area municipalities in Halton, as well as Halton Region and Haltech coming together to broaden the extent of this program into a region-wide event that we'll be working on for next year. So the work that was undertaken by this was led by Alison Newton in our department, and she's pictured here in this photograph. This is just some photos from the event, and you can see it was quite well attended last year. And the third award is a provincial award from the Economic Development Council of Ontario. And pictured here is Victoria Stasiak in our office, and she led the work on an auto mayor's initiative. This was a series of events and meetings bringing together mayors, various stakeholders from industry, economic development officials, as well as researchers from across the province to work in support of the auto sector in Ontario to help support and grow the industry here. So since the creation of our economic development strategy in 2009, our department has been awarded a total of 4 provincial, 4 national, and 5 international awards, including the highest award from our National Economic Development Association for our economic development strategy. And this work that we've undertaken and the awards that are presented do recognize the hard work and the excellence that all of our team work towards every day in the department. And I'd like to thank them here for all of their hard work.
Thank you, Ms. St. George. Councils and I certainly appreciate all the hard work and the success that we've enjoyed thanks to your hard work at growing our job base in this town and exceeding our targets year after year. And that's been a wonderful dividend of having our very own economic development department. I think we've proven the validity of that model.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. But wait, there's more. Paul Lowes will present the Excellence in Planning Award from the Ontario Professional Planners Institute in the category of Municipal Statutory Planning Studies for the, drum roll, the In-Zone project. Mr. Lowes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm representing the Ontario Professional Planners Institute, fondly named as OPPI. OPPI is recognized in Ontario as the jurisdiction governing planning profession. We set out the rights and responsibilities of our members. We set academic experience and examination requirements of our members. We have the mandate to granting the Registered Professional Planner of Ontario, the RPP designation. Those who are members who pass the examination will have after their name the RPP designation. 25 of our members, of our 4,000 members, work for your municipality. And I'm pleased to announce your In-Zone project, the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw, is the winner of OPPI's Municipal Statutory Planning Studies Reports and Documents category for 2015. As my profession in planning, I often do comprehensive zoning bylaws. I've done a number of them, and I can attest it's difficult to get the public and your community excited about something as far-reaching as a comprehensive zoning bylaw. But your staff have really done an exemplary project, exemplary role in creating a project that's transcended that typical dry review to one that engaged your citizens in the development matters and matters that directly affect their lives. And really, it is a zoning bylaw of any planning document that directly affects your residents' lives. And many people realize that when an application comes before them or before the community. Your staff and your council engaged over 1,300 individuals in that process, and that is really exemplary for any zoning bylaw project. It's a strong example of how a statutory process can engage and result in significant innovations. And your bylaw is clear, it's concise, it's user-friendly, and I know that as well because I use your bylaw regularly, and it is an exemplary bylaw. And your town staff are better informed and positioned to provide that information to the public and, frankly, for the public to understand it, which is no great task for a comprehensive zoning bylaw. So, Mayor Burton, members of the council, I congratulate you on behalf of OPPI and present to you this 2015 Excellence in Planning Award.
Thank you very much. Wait 1 second. Wait 1 second. Hold your applause. You know, it's rare that I do this, and so everyone forgive me if I offend you, but really one member of staff really stood out in making this the success that it was, and that's Joe Nethery, who brought a sense of humor and a perspective to this job that, I don't think we could have achieved these results without. So, Joe, would you come up and accept it on our behalf? And then we'll applaud. And this way you'll know we really did like the job you did. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now. Thank you very much. Come back. Well done. Hopefully everybody was okay with that. Thank you. Good. All right, Council, we have two delegations tonight. They're both concerning an item in the Standing Committee report. One is Ms. Betty Buck, and the other is Graham Tuff. And this is about leash-free areas in Post Park. Is Mrs. Buck here? Would you like to come to the central podium and bring us your information, please? You're welcome, and Council's looking forward to your information.
Good evening. I feel my issue is not nearly as important as the previous issues, and I'm honored that I was able to hear the efforts of the other people and believe in their efforts and strongly support them in every way. From November the 9th meeting, a recap. The town's recommendations were to move a gate in Post Park to the easterly side, to add a gate, to pave an existing walkway, to add trees, but to deny the request to extend the leash-free area any further than it already is. A motion was then read, which was significantly different from the town's recommendations. As a result, we have, contrary to the town's, Chris Marks in particular's, unbelievable amount of research and recommendations and times for surveying factors and costs, that this addition of a fence corridor leading to the leash-free area from the parking lot be approved. It actually entails 30,000 square feet of public green space from a public park, and it will be allocated and added to an already generous parcel of land exclusively for dogs. The leash-free area is approximately 2 acres already. A little bit of history. In 1991, we bought our property, our home, abuts onto the leash-free area, which did not exist until 1997. After many meetings, we agreed to a trial leash-free area along 100 feet of our southerly property line. There was and continues to be privacy issues, as dogs run up and down and around the fence line. Trees were planted to try to buffer this area slightly, and it was to no avail. I am in agreement with the leash-free area. I am a dog owner. I have had 2 golden retrievers, and I am very envious of all the people that can use the leash-free area. I unfortunately cannot, because my dog was attacked when I entered the leash-free area when he was a puppy. So I walk around the leash-free area and see the people using it, and I'm happy for the community because it is a great adjunct to our neighborhood. But before you vote this evening, respectively, I ask that the council take a final look at what the town has recommended to the committee. Number 1, recommended relocation of the existing gate easterly to be more in line with the 3 paths that already access the dog park, and to improve the path access from the parking lot with an extension around the barriers. This recommendation is what was passed, and I'm not against that part. It will provide a more direct line for people to walk to the leash-free area with access from the parking lot. It is maintained and it is plowed. It means owners don't have to trudge through the snow, which seems to be a perceived safety issue and a hazard. I believe this will alleviate some of the foot traffic that currently does not use this pathway. It walks on the west side, which is where my home is. The town has recommended against fencing the walking corridor. It did recommend as an alternative to put a second double-gated entrance at the top western edge of the existing dog park. This would shorten the distance for dog walkers to get their dogs to the leash-free area. We're talking 30 meters here. And more importantly, stop the need for the dogs to walk past the children's playground. This recommendation was turned down. Instead, the walking corridor is to be fenced, all next to my property. 400 feet of a side fence, along with 100 feet across the back. The gate would then be put near the parking lot. I don't agree with this, and I don't understand why the town would recommend it. Maybe the town could have recommended another pathway and plow it on the west side. Everyone seems to agree the corridor is only supposed to be for walking to the current dog park, but it will not work out that way. It will be an extension of the leash-free area in all intents and purposes. Dogs will run there as well, and the dog park will wrap around my home. This disadvantages me far worse than anyone else whose property is adjacent to the dog park. Everyone else has only one border, their backyard, not both the side and the back. Everyone else enjoys some buffer in the form of either a pathway or a fenced-off bog area within the dog park. Only my property will be so severely disadvantaged. To this fact, I ask, why is this necessary? The walking corridor access issue would be addressed by a new path to a second gate, which is plowed. The relocation of the easterly gate provides better direct access from the east as well. No one will have to cross the soccer field. It makes sense, and it's far less visually intrusive than a fenced corridor. I also point out that dog park users from the south and east all use a plowed path to get there all winter long to the leash-free area. And why should just the people that come to the parking lot by car have a fenced walking access? It doesn't make sense. If this is really about walking safety, a second plowed pathway would address it. So what I ask is this: pass the proposal to relocate the easterly gate and improve the easterly path access from the parking lot. Then let's see what happens. Let's see if people use it more regularly and that the problem might be solved, as Mr. Mark believes. In the meantime, defer passing the fenced walking corridor and ask the town to look at the possibility of a new path leading to the second westerly gate the town proposed as an alternative. If town council is inclined nonetheless to approve the fenced walking corridor, then it must amend the proposal to require that my property be given a reasonable buffer as other properties enjoy. Not just trees and bushes, but a distancing of the actual corridor from my side yard, giving me the privacy that I deserve. It is unfair to use my side boundary for this walking corridor. If council needs to postpone this motion to look maybe into this, it should do so. The dog park has been here since 1997, so have its problems. One more season won't make enough difference. One more reason won't make enough difference to hasten this decision. Please take into account that we are taxpayers and we have been, please take my issues into account, and I thank you for listening to us tonight.
Thank you for bringing your information. Councillor Grant has a question.
Just a point of clarification. You mentioned why would the town recommend this, and I just want to make it clear that you understand that this motion, which passed by only a single vote, by the way, was not from the town staff. It was made by a member of council who's a frequent user of the park. You know that, correct?
I do know.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I understand there's going to be some discussion about it, and we have another delegation as well. And it's one of the next items after the delegation, so you'll have an answer very quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you for your information. The next registered delegation is Mr. Graham Tuff on the same topic. Welcome, Mr. Tuff. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mayor Burton, and members of council. I sent you all an email last Friday, the lucky 13th, outlining the background and the reasons that supported the motion that was put before council, or pardon me, the Community Services Group, and carried last Monday night. While there are a few of us here in attendance tonight, you can all nicely wave for me, I have copies of letters and additional separate petitions of well over 100 separate users and dog users who are requesting that this motion be put forward and agreed to. As my letter to you last week indicated, there are two initiatives as part of this motion, and they're both totally safety-driven. We need to allow ourselves, our dog walkers, and our pets safe and stress-free access to the leash-free area in South Post Park. This is well over 110 meters long, and in the winter and inclement weather, it is a very challenging walk. Livable Oakville should provide all of us with safe access and passage to the leash-free area. As I indicated in my email last week, I addressed all of our difficulties and the solution that we put up with, or put forward last week that was accepted. I welcome any questions you may have and look forward to your support on this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Giddings. Mr. Tuff will come back for you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Tuff, and I appreciated our conversation last week. We had discussed the pathway down the east side of the park, and one of the recommendations or proposals was to pave that to provide for safe passage. And I guess your concern with that was the salt and sand that would be used as a de-icer or to make it safe for walking. Is that correct?
Exactly. It has been plowed regularly for the past few years, and most, if not all of us, choose not to walk our dogs down there because as they plow it, they sand it and or salt it, and the dogs get very ill and or chew their paws and have difficulties with that. So all of us literally walk through the soccer field in the ice and snow to get to the park.
So the intent to have a trail on the westerly side, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be after it to be paved or plowed, obviously. It's just to provide an area for it to be packed down or?
Precisely. This year we had over 28 loads of wood chips delivered by the town, which was fantastic. All of us there shoveled them and scooped them around such that the park is nice and dry and full of wood chips. The entire perimeter around the park in the south area is where we walk. And despite the snow and the ice, when there are 100 or so of us every day or every week tramp around there, it gets chewed up very nicely and it's safe and easy to walk on those wood chips. If we were to have that corridor going down the west side, we would wood chip it ourselves, it would very quickly get tramped down and be very safe to walk on.
All right, I appreciate that. One of the concerns expressed by the previous delegation, Mrs. Buck, was the using of their fence or their joint fence, park fence, and asking that there be a greater buffer area or separation, if you will, to have, I guess, the dog park people put up two pieces of fence to form the corridor. That was done away with in the proposal that came to committee last week. I'm just curious the thought behind that.
Yeah, that's correct. Mr. Marks had initially sort of shown three proposals. Right. One, the paving on the east side, two, a full wide corridor, and three, a narrower corridor that we might use. The Humane Society also attended those meetings. Their indication was for the best and safest access for the dogs and the owners would be to have the widest corridor possible. So that was what was put forward in the motion and agreed to.
All right, and the correspondence that you were good enough to send to us goes back a month or two ago. It had talked about your desire to speak with the neighbors so that you could work together as a team and reach consensus rather than individual factions. Can you bring us up to date on any update on that, or whether you were able to get together and discuss that?
Yes, I sent that note to Mr. Mark, and I did not hear back, so I didn't pursue it.
All right, so you weren't able to speak with the neighbors?
No, it was not.
All right,
Now, I do know Betty very well.
right.
We are friends despite this. We're just trying to, and ideally, get through it in an amicable way, yes.
All right, last question. This will be funded by the postpartum puppy people.
Yes.
For lack of a better, name.
We're all puppies, as you can see back here.
Well, we'll have a break time soon. In terms of costing, do you have a ballpark figure in terms of what it would cost? I'm just curious in terms of time frame to have the proposed work done.
Mr. Mark shared some numbers with us, I guess a week ago and also a month ago. We're not really sure, but we would come up with the funds to get it done, yes. I'm suggesting it'd be about $10,000.
All right, so this fall, next spring, just,
It would be ideal to do it next week. Yeah, before the snow comes. Last year was, well, some of my friends here still have the injuries from falling.
yeah. All right, so you do think it'll be able to be done very quickly then?
Yes, as fast as the town could build it, yes.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Mr. Tuff. You mentioned a concern in terms of the animals getting salt and sand and these sort of things in their paws. So what do you do to walk your dogs outside of going to the park, or is the park the only place?
Most of us just do that, yes. We drive to the park or walk to the park, and that's what we do, yes.
So what would have happened prior to '97 when there was a leash-free dog park?
Many of us took our dogs to the park without the leash free and sort of contravened the laws.
Fair enough, thank you.
Councillor Hilger.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. Just a question of the cost, similar to Councillor Giddings, but also about the fence buffer between the Buck property. Are you willing to pay for the fence buffer and the other, like 2 fences? Is that part of the cost you're saying when you mentioned 10,000? That's part of your costing?
No, the $10,000 that I just raised would have been the one fence. If there's a second fence required as a buffer, I would suggest, I'd like to see the town come up with that.
The town come up with that?
Yes, sir.
But if they don't?
One fence would give us, from the property line to the one fence, it would protect the dogs.
But if it's decided that there should be 2 fences, so there is a bit of a buffer for the bucks who have a 400-foot and a 100-foot now, you know, if that goes through, that's what they have. They're surrounded by the dogs going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing, your committee, you're willing to pay for both fences?
I would suggest we'd come up with it, yes.
How long will it take you to come up with it? Because I guess you're going to come up with the money before anything ever gets built anyhow.
Yes, that would be the plan, yes.
Yeah, so if
Yes.
it's like 20,000, how long, like
A month?
a month?
Mm-hmm.
No problem, eh? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Grant.
And I might need staff's help with this as well, but if you recall, although vehemently opposed to the motion that passed, I did make sure there was a requirement that your group did pay for screening, not just for Mrs. Buck's property, but because Humane Society did raise the concern that there were children playing in the park and that the dogs would go insane watching these children playing, whether it be soccer or frisbee or just running. And the concern being that the dogs watching these children playing through that chain link fence would try and jump it. So you would have to pay for all sorts of shrubbery and things like that along the fence line. You do know that that is also a cost that your group has to cover.
We are aware of that, but I'd like to make sure that council understands that a good third of that fence today is right along the soccer field, and there's no issues of that nature. I'm there twice a day. So I would challenge the Humane Society on that, yes.
But it's part of the motion, I believe, and that's where I think we might need staff involved.
Yes, if part of the motion, we would agree.
Councillor Lischina.
Good evening, Mr. Tuff. I'm not a dog owner, but I certainly have a lot of neighbors who walk their dogs all winter along the sidewalks and all over the town. The concern about the salt and the dog on the dog feet, I'm quite surprised that this is the only place that there would be a problem with, considering there's people walking all the way across town on sidewalks that are plowed and then, you know, salted so nobody gets hurt. Could you explain that? I mean, what's the veterinarian stance? I don't know.
I'm certainly no vet. Perhaps the post-park laneway, the screen laneway, is provided with much more salt and/or sand than the normal sidewalks. That's all I could speak to.
So if that was that's the main issue that you're concerned about then? The health of the feet?
That's part of it. The issue would still be we would have 110, 120 yards of walkway all the way down to the leash-free zone through that area. And whether it's been recently plowed and or iced over or salted, it's still 120 yards to get down to the park.
Pardon me, but from a health perspective, that's also good for the dog walker as well, to have some exercise besides just driving to a park.
Oh, agreed. We'd still have the walk. It's just whether the dogs are pulling on the leash or not. See, the issue in the wintertime is the dogs, at least half, if not 2/3, are very anxious to get to the park. So they get out of the car on the leash and they're pulling and pulling and pulling. And it's a real challenge to hold them in the wintertime. If we had the parking lot access right there, we put them in, take them off the leash, and then we both walk very nicely all the way down to the park.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Grant again?
Just again about pulling dogs, though, you do recall that the Humane Society had noted a very deep concern about the fact that the dogs would arrive without a leash, and you just release them in the parking lot, and that actually having them walk through a walkway with a leash on would allow them to calm down a bit before they got to the dog park, whereas if you release them in the parking lot, they would still be wild and going crazy through this small access area.
We would not be releasing them in the parking lot. We would take them to the double gate, open it up as we do now, and then release them. That's what we do today, and that's what we would do. No question.
I think I understood exactly what you said, and I'm going to let it go, but we're now into debate with the delegation, and our custom here is to receive information rather than to argue with residents. We debate among ourselves. Any other questions for more information from Mr. Tuff? Thank you very much, Mr. Tuff, for your information. Council, that brings us to our standing committee reports, and I would look for a mover and seconder for all of the standing committee reports as listed in the agenda, except for item number 1 from Community Services. Councillor Giddings is the mover. Councillor Elgar is the seconder.
I have one other item in the admin services.
Thank you.
Which is Schedule 12 related to the driving school operator. I have a question of staff.
All right, so it's seconded by you as well?
I'll second, yeah.
Then I'll put the vote. All in. Councillor Adams, do you have one?
Well, I want to make sure that we are separating item 6 from ASC, not just asking a question.
Can't hear you.
I would like to separate item 6 from ASC. It wasn't clear from Councillor Elgar whether he was moving item 6 immediately as it stood or not, because depending on the outcome of the discussion, I might like to make an amendment.
Okay, I understood Councillor Elgar to be separating item 6, even though he said Schedule 12.
Wonderful.
So we're all separated and clear now. Item 1 from CSC, item 6 from ASC. I'll call the vote on the balance. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and those reports are adopted. Now, item number 1 from Community Services. We need a a motion, and doesn't look like anybody's got one. I'll try to generate one here. As chair, I
Your
can't-
Worship, Councillor Hutchins has.
Councillor
indicated
Hutchins?
something.
Yes, I was going to generate the motion to
Move it as reported.
as reported.
Thank you. Now we need a seconder. Councillor Adams. Discussion is in order. Any discussants? Councillor Giddings.
I appreciate the motion. I just have a number of questions based on the delegations that spoke. I'm not sure of the costs and how quickly it can be done. I know that's not directly a concern of ours. I would feel better if we had the costs in place, that we addressed the potential puppy area that's talked about. Reading the report two different ways, I can see it being in the new entrance area, which would cause me a concern. I'd feel better if we had a firm handle on the planting plan, that if it were to go forward would help alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbors to the west. And I'm still not comfortable with the buffer area. I believe it was Mrs. Buck that suggested perhaps we could move the gate first and see what repercussions that has on it. So that's just to start off. Thanks.
Who's next? Mr. Mayor, to speak? Yes. Sorry, Your Worship. Go ahead. Sorry, pardon my
Councillor O'Meara.
stumbling.
Councillor O'Meara is acting mayor for November, and I wish to participate in the debate on this rather than chair it. Council, I cannot support this motion. It goes against everything I believe about livable Oakville. The whole impetus of what drew me into municipal politics was that we needed to respect each other and protect each other from negative impacts of development and activity. And here we have a case where we're asking one property owner to submit to a degree of envelopment by a dog park that we've asked no one else to do. And we've gone down a path that I think breaks the spirit that I think we're about in terms of respecting each other and protecting each other as much as we can from negative impacts. My wife is a dedicated dog walker, and I'm probably going to be in the doghouse because she's in favor of this this concept. And I'm going to make it worse than I probably should, because I'm going to describe for you what's animating my wife. She drives our dog to that dog park because she likes variety, and she goes around the town to each one. And she wants to park there and then walk conveniently to the gate and not have to take the big hike. And I've been saying to her, well, you know, go somewhere else. We got a lot of dog parks in this town. We don't need to do this to one of our fellow citizens for the sake of people's desire to have a short walk from the parking lot. The people who walk their dogs to the dog park don't have a short walk. Why are we singling out a set of driving dog walkers so that they don't have to walk their dog? It breaks my concept of who we are. So I would urge you to defeat this motion and substitute the staff's motion, which was, I think, the staff's recommendation, which I think was very carefully crafted with a great deal not only of public consultation, but of consideration for each other. And so I think I probably should stop now, because I think I've run out of things to say, but that's my heartfelt plea to you.
Thanks. Councillor Hutchin next.
Thank you. First of all, it's not a short walk, particularly in the wintertime when you're being dragged by dogs along a path. Presently, the walkway to the east is snowplowed, but it gets very icy, and if you put salt on the road, on the ground, the dog's paws get all clumped up and it hurts the dogs. It's much easier to get from, obviously, out of the car with a leash and enter the dog park immediately, and that's what every other leash-free has, as far as I'm aware. So it is a safety issue that we're talking about, not the convenience issue. Dogs can easily pull people. In fact, I have also slipped and been pulled over by my dog doing that walk. It's not particularly that I'm worried about myself, but most of the people who use that park are middle-aged or elderly people, and there are people who are walkers, in fact, that actually use that dog park. So having access where they're not pulled to the bottom of Post Park, I think is very important. Secondly, this is a democracy. People purchase housing around parks because they like to be around parks where they don't have anyone else building next to them. That's why people want to go to parks. But that doesn't mean that they should dictate what goes on in the park. It's important to understand that over 100 people has approached myself and Mr. Tuff on this issue, and they are extremely interested as well as concerned about the safety, and they want to get into the park in the shortest possible time so they're not pulled over. This is a simple matter. If the Humane Society has stated that there's no issues with dogs being aggressive as long as there's a wide space, so that's why we were suggesting as wide a space as possible. So that's my take on your suggestions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Grant.
Thank you, and I agree with most of what the mayor says, and I'm sure his wife won't be too angry once I kind of explain my concerns, and that's that essentially I have no doubt that we have a group of very responsible dog owners and people who will look after their dogs and make sure that they're doing the best they can, but we're talking about animals. We're talking about dogs, actually, and animals act like animals do. You can be as responsible as you want, but once that dog is off the leash, you have no clue what's going to happen, and I'm viewing this through the lens of a person who has been the chair of our appeals committee, or as we like to call it, the biting dog committee, which means that I see all sorts of dog attacks. I hear about all sorts of dog-on-dog violence. And during the CSC meeting, I spoke to the officer who I deal with most often on that committee and said to her, can you see this being a problem in this little walkway area? And she agreed that yes, it could be a higher problem, mainly because there's a large amount of trees in this area that's going to get fenced off. So taking away the fact that we're removing a group of trees from an area that would be a playground for children, we're including now a group of trees into an area where dogs are going to be, which means that these dogs have areas that they can hide, attack each other, and fight, and are not within view and controllable. And that makes it very difficult for me. So as much as we talk about the detriments this is to the owners, I'm more concerned about the detriments this will have to dogs. I do not want to see more dogs getting hurt in our community. And I'm afraid that if we let this go forward without any further consideration for the actual animals themselves, there could be a problem. And again, I completely believe that the people are responsible for their animals, but once off the leash, animals act as animals do. And I apologize, but frankly, that's just how I feel.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. I have Councillor Elgar next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I have a question to staff, and it's related to the trail on the east side where we are looking at paving it. And I'm wondering whether we get some kind of a compromise, whether we've ever considered for that particular trail this winter to use shavings to see how that works. So we don't have the issue of the salt, and see whether with 100 people going back and forth every day, if it works rather than plowing and salting and sanding. I wonder whether staff would consider that to see how that works out for this one winter.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Agar, could you elaborate a little bit on shavings as a term? I'm not quite familiar with that.
What I'm thinking of, and you see it around the countryside, more in the rural areas, but if there's a pathway, it gets very muddy and it's always wet. But if people take and they run boards down the side and they fill it with shavings, then as you need more, keep adding shaving, similar to what they're doing in the dog park now. Instead of plowing it altogether, and see how that works out for people, just with straight shavings down. Then we don't have the salt issue on the dog's feet either. And I don't know if we ever have done this in Oakville, but it's maybe worthwhile to try to see how it works.
So we'd be putting essentially wood chips, I guess, down the length of the pathway. The pathway would not be plowed then, but I guess they'd just be walking through wood chip snow as they're doing currently in the existing leaf-free area.
Just wonder whether we can try that and see if it does work, if it might satisfy everybody, because I think people are concerned about the salt on the dogs, on the pads of their feet. So if it would be unreasonable to at least try it for one, cycle it through for a season.
I will say that the material that's put down on the walkway is a very pickled sand. It's mostly 9 parts sand and 1 part salt, so it's extremely pickled. So it's not straight salt. The other option is using ice melter product, is what we use on walkways here into Town Hall as an example, rather than salt. I'd have to give some thought to the notion of spreading wood chips along the entire pathway. It certainly is an option. That's for sure.
Further to what you just mentioned, though, you don't use the regular salt. You use, is it like a brine you put on?
No, it's a pickled material. It's 9 parts sand and 1 part salt.
So it's pickled. It's the bigger hunks.
Exactly.
But when it dissolves, I guess, is what the concern then. It's still the salt and
there is
the
a little
water.
bit for melting properties. There has to be a little bit of, or we could just look at using straight sand instead of no salt on
That's
the
what I'm
walkway,
wondering.
which might be the better way to go. We could still plow it, which would give it at least the walkway an opportunity to dry, and then just use sand and no salt in the sand. So at least there's some grit there, but there is no salt within the sand.
You can say, people care about their dogs, and they do care about the feed and the salt. It is frustrating. It's not good for the dogs either. I wonder whether we could trial that to see, like.
Sorry, Councillor Largo, we're starting to talk about alternative solutions and not really the motion that's before us here. So
but at least I think there may be an alternative.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have Councillor Lischenia, then Councillor Hutchins for a second time.
Lischenia. I still have to say it. So my comment again is actually thinking town-wide. We have dog owners every day walking sidewalks in the winter that are plowed, that have all sorts of material on them to prevent slips, and sometimes slips do happen, and dogs are walking on the material as well. And even just a side issue, I mean, my sister-in-law is it's her son, it's not her dog, and she gets these booties. I mean, I didn't know that there were booties for dogs, but my point is that this is a town-wide issue, and when you're making exception for people who use this park, what about everybody else in the town that's walking our sidewalks that are pretty much the same type of walking material in this park? So I am supportive of what the mayor had said earlier.
Thank you, and I believe we have Councillor Hutchins.
Okay, the reason there's a leash-free in the first place is really the idea of not having dogs off-leash, which is a peculiar state to be in, because coming from England, they don't recognize such things. They think dog owners are responsible, and if something happens with the dog, then there's the responsibility of the owner to make it right. I would be quite happy to do away with the leash-free completely, as long as you do away with the bylaw that requires dogs to be on leash, because that's what's creating the problem. It's the bylaw from the town that says the dogs has to be on leash that creates the leash-frees, because you need areas for dogs to run and play, and most people can't run as fast as dogs on a leash, so they have to have areas to let them off and play in leash-frees. This particular leash-free is a long way from the parking lot, and it's that issue to try to make the parking lot and the leash-free closer, so there isn't a problem with people being dragged by dogs during the winter over icy conditions and causing a problem. And the other little question I was going to answer, I spoke to the Humane Society. Their recommendations were not specific to the town, to the post park. They were general recommendations, so there was no recommendations about keeping the path wider or narrower. They wanted to say that dogs in confined spaces had problems. Those with wider areas did not. There is, as far as I'm aware, no particular issues at Post Park of dogs fighting and everything else. That very rarely happens. Thank you.
Councillor Liszczynia.
Liszczyna.
Liszczyna. Well, that's
There's no ya at the end.
My apologies. My apologies, Councillor.
I think, Councillor Hutchins, that's really a stretch when you're saying that this should, there shouldn't be a bylaw regarding, leashes. What about the rest of us who are not dog people? And you know what? I have to tell everybody, I was really scared when I started canvassing this past summer for the by-election, and because I was bit by a dog when I was a little girl, and and I understand that people love their animals, and I have to respect that. And so Oakville has a lot of pet owners, and all of them are just as important as people who aren't pet owners. And so I made the effort to walk to those houses, and initially sort of with some trepidation and fear, but in the end, 6 weeks later, I know that they're very responsible owners. Sometimes they jumped at me, but I could tell they weren't really trying to bite me. But the whole point is that it's important to make sure that everybody's, daily living is both relaxing and stress-free. And I know it's important for dog owners to make sure that their dogs get exercise. But in the end, there's also people who don't have dogs. And, when you stretch it to, we shouldn't even have a bylaw for that, I think that's a little far-fetched.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I'm going to say, first of all, if the motion doesn't pass, I might recommend to Councillor Hutchins that he refer the matter back to give himself some more time to consider various options. But I just wanted to point out at Glenashton we have a dog park where the parking lot is right up against where the dog park is, and to my knowledge we haven't had any issues around dogs off leash there. It isn't adjacent immediately to a residential area, so it's different in that respect, but I'm quite certain there are other options that could be considered as well. So I offer that piece of advice for what it's worth, and that's all.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the matter then? So the motion we have before us is moved by Councillor Hutchinson, seconded by Councillor Adams, was the one that was forwarded on from CSC. So I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of the motion? And opposed? The motion is defeated. Chair recognizes Mayor Burton.
I'd like to substitute the staff recommendation as the motion before council.
Do I have a seconder? Oh, sorry, Councillor Giddings. Is there any discussion on the matter? Councillor Hutchins, is that a hand up? No. Okay, then I'll call the vote. All in favor of the staff recommendation? And opposed? Sorry, is that a hand up then? Opposed? Okay. So that motion carries then. Thank you very much. And I believe I will be turning the chair back over to His Worship.
Congratulations on your first outing as acting mayor, and I think you did a fine job. And look at the extra value. We've all learned better how to say Liszczyna. All right. Let's see. I've got to get back to the right page here. The next item before us is item number 6 from Administrative Services Committee, which was separated by Councillor Elgar. So Councillor Elgar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Burton. Item number 6, Schedule 12 refers to, it mentions that the vehicle to be used as a driving school vehicle is no more than 7 years old. And I have a resident who lives in the ward who has a part-time driving school, and his concern is that 7 years is not fair. And I would like to get some response from staff, because he mentioned that there's absolutely nowhere in Ontario where they have such a bylaw which restricts a vehicle older than 7 years. So I just wonder if Mr. Barry can tell me when the 7 years came into effect, whether it's new or whether it's been around for a few years, and whether he thinks it's maybe an option that we should change it. And I would also like to know the other driving school people that are in Oakville, working in Oakville, how do they feel about it also? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We've had driving an age limit on our vehicles since 1965. It's gone up and down a little bit over the years, but I can say we've had it for a long time, and mainly for safety reasons. It feeds right into the reasons we license: health and safety, consumer protection. It's been suggested that vehicle owners provide safeties on a yearly basis, so that should provide that safety. Well, safeties are only good for 30 days after they're issued, so in a year that provides that period of safety. As vehicles age, we know they wear out, and if a vehicle is 4, 5, 6, 7 years old being used as a driving school, although it may have a vehicle safety once a year, a look over once a year, we can expect there could be a failing in that vehicle, and we want to make sure that since there are novice drivers in those vehicles, that they're safe. And again, that's why we've had that restriction or that regulation in place since about 1965. There's also the fact that as vehicles, and this is something that came about as part of our engagement with the industry. Some of the other driving schools indicated that as vehicles age, the technology in the vehicle itself changes. So if you don't refresh that vehicle, the driver that's being trained doesn't have access to that new technology in the vehicle, whether it would have been ABS brakes at one time or the changes that commonly occur in vehicles. So, and to that end, the driving schools themselves generally not only supported the 7 years, but they were the ones that came forward and said maybe we should actually have a maximum kilometer limit on the vehicles. And that's why we came forward in the original draft of the bylaw with a 7-year and a 300,000 kilometer limit. We've since removed the 300,000 kilometer limit, but the 7-year we've stuck with for health and safety reasons.
Well, I thank you. So you're saying the other driving schools, they actually wanted 7 and 300,000? Or
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, so they have no problems at all with this ruling?
Through our engagement, they didn't seem to have any problems with this.
Okay, I thank you very much for the answers to the questions.
Councillor Adams.
On the same schedule, I wondered if staff would be able to give me a little bit of feedback with respect to Part 3B, where at the last council meeting we discussed removing 3B in its entirety, and instead we've got an addition to it that now reads, except where a driving school operator or instructor is picking up a student. And I wondered why staff, if you could explain again why you think that that's a better concept than just removing it in its entirety, given that a driving student would have to be able to drive around playgrounds and schools all the time, and I can't think of a neighborhood where you'd really be able to drive around and not be within 150 meters or passing within 150 meters of a playground or a school for that matter.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, again, this comes down to, as staff, trying to weigh safety. We've had the prohibition in the bylaw, again, and this one I can't remember, but I know it was in at least the last version of the bylaw, and I believe the version before that. And we understand that there needs to be some allowances as we move forward. So what we've tried to do is create an allowance here that would allow the vehicle to go onto the property, because we know that some driving training is taught at high schools. allow it to go onto the property and leave with the driver, the novice driver driving. But the intent would be that they wouldn't do that as normal part of practice, that it would just be for those occasions. So we've tried to split the difference and continue with a focus on safety, but allow some leeway to it.
Is the concern that the student driver is going to hit a child, or is the issue that there are too many driving students being driven around a school, that like a high school where they're being picked up all the time? Which is it? Is it a issue of nuisance, or is it an issue of safety with respect to crazy driving, hitting dogs and cats and children?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think I'd categorize it as crazy driving, but what we do know is that they are novice drivers. And if something, our concern is if something does startle them, they may not be in a position to resolve that quick enough to avoid accident. So the regulations we've had have seemed to work, and our suggestion again was to continue them forward with an amendment that would allow some access to the properties.
Do other municipalities have this clause?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, off the top of my head, and I don't have that information with me, so I couldn't answer that question. I do believe, sorry, I don't have it with me.
If council struck that particular element, 3B, would you have special concerns, or are you 50-50 on it and it can go either way?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest, if council were to consider striking that, that we at least continue a prohibition that would regulate the schools and not allow them to conduct low-speed maneuvers in those areas. So not allow practicing parking or the low-speed maneuvers, just to make sure they can still pass through. Because as you've noted, there are a lot of schools, so we could see there might be some reasonability in that, but not actually conduct the training.
Could you offer up a particular wording that we might use then instead?
I do have some wording that might be applicable. How best I can read it out, or I can pass it to Madam Clerk?
It would be ideal if it was passed up to the clerk so we'd have a record of it. And it should be read out for everyone as well, or perhaps put on the overhead. And I believe at that point, there may be some discussion ensuing, Councillor Adams.
I greatly prefer this over the existing, and so. I'm sorry. How's that? Any better? I greatly.
If you seek to persuade, people need to hear you.
Well, of course. I greatly prefer the possible wording that's provided to us here over the existing wording. And so if council is amenable, I'd like to move that we amend the recommendation from the committee to include this particular item as part of it as well. I think the required wording would be that we move the recommendation of the committee, and under part 1 include a subject to the modification as listed.
Thank you, Councillor, for the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lischina. Councillor Elgar, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm having a lot of trouble with why we want to go this way when there are a lot of young students who go out of class in their spares and do get driving instruction from a driving instructor, which is, it looks to me, is what the town tried to enable for the students, trying to, if they have a spare, the driving instructor comes, picks up, puts them in the car. I thought the wording was pretty good. I thought it was very reasonable. And I'm trying to understand why we're complicating everything here. Like, I'm having a lot of trouble understanding, Councillor Adams, why you're trying to really complicate things instead of making it nice and simple, where driving instruction go pick up they're teenagers, they're not little 2-year-olds, pick them up and give them a training course during the day when it's not as busy on the roads.
That's actually what this does, and
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Councillor Lischina.
Councillor Elgar, at the ASC meeting, we had an instructor who was discussing the issue with respect to driving through. So what happens right now, according to the wording that we have in our books, is the instructor will come to the school, put the kids in the car, and then has to drive away 150 meters before that they could drive away, but they cannot do anything else around the school. That was my understanding.
Well, it was sort of a fast-moving discussion. It wound up, as Mr. Barry just described earlier this evening, that they would be able to put the student in the driver's seat
and drive away.
Leave the school. So I just wanted to bring that correction to the discussion. Councillor Adams, I think you're next.
My apologies. This actually continues to allow a student to be picked up at a school, and merely says that apart from these things, you can continue your driving lesson around a school. It actually helps students have more flexibility in the kind of training and where they can train than the existing recommendation of the committee. So I'm moving an amendment that eases the restrictions. It doesn't complicate them.
Councillor Adams, were you originally of a mind to remove the restriction entirely?
That when I came in tonight, that was where I was going, and based on our discussion with staff and their reluctance and around the issue of safety, I'm taking their possible amendment here as a recommendation and using it instead. If council would prefer to remove it entirely, I'm okay with that as well.
Mr. Barry, council might like to know if you and staff are satisfied with this wording that you've put forward. And we'll find out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick to point out, we've been discussing a lot about schools and training from schools, and a key point is that the restriction also applies to elementary schools, so we have to take that into consideration as we're considering this. The wording before us here, it is a relaxed form of what we have already, so it is stepping down a bit. But it does continue to provide some protection for those schools. So we aren't allowing it a free-for-all. We're saying you can drive past it, but don't do any real training in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Councillor Knoll and then Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. I'll support Councillor Adams's motion. I think it's a good compromise. However, I would prefer to see this struck altogether. As you had suggested, as a potential option. And my rationale is this. There's the issue of secondary schools providing driver's ed from the school. There's the issue of students doing it during their spares. But there's also the issue of the fact that students, young drivers that are learning to drive for the first time, need to experience all aspects of our road system, including school zones, learning to respect the rules of driving in a school zone. And I think that's equally important to the secondary school issue. if you look at the routes that the Drive school, I can't remember what the name of the company that does it now for the province, but if you look at the routes that they do, a number of their routes actually take you right through school zones. I know recently one of my kids had taken the test, and we drove every one of the routes. We found them on the internet, and we drove every one of the routes, and at least 2 of them actually took you by a school for exactly that reason, because they want to see the students respond properly to the school zone and the dangers that are inherent in that particular neighborhood. From my perspective as a parent, both of previously young children, like all of us, but also of teenagers, I want my kids exposed to that, and I think that everybody needs to be exposed to that. And if you're ever going to be exposed to a circumstance where there is potential risk, I'd rather they be exposed to it with a licensed, experienced instructor beside them than for the first time that they experience it with their new license and never having been in that neighborhood before. So I'll support Councillor Adams's motion. If it's defeated or if he wishes to withdraw it, I'd rather see removing this altogether, because I think it's putting unnecessary restrictions in the face of young people trying to learn to drive.
Councillor O'Meara.
Actually, I'm going to support this as well, the amendment. I think it made sense in ASC, and it makes sense now. And I would ask that we do use this, as my colleagues in Ward 3 will know, which the Ward 1 councillors are now experiencing. A lot of the drive error examination are using every single obstacle on the streets as a point to teach. And I would not want those sorts of maneuvers, 3-point turns, parallel parking, to be happening in front of an elementary school. So I agree that this is a good compromise. But I do agree with the need for it. I mean, you wouldn't want to have a student get out of the car, let the instructor in, drive past a school, then when you're doing clear, then get out and switch again. That makes no sense. So I think this is a little clearer, so I'll support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. I think it's a lovely compromise also. Are there other speakers? Who was the seconder? Did I get a seconder? Councillor Lischenna, that's right. That gave me a chance to say the name again. So item 6, with the change suggested by Councillor Adams, is on the floor. I'd like to call the vote on that package. Councillor Knoll.
Can I try one more thing?
Of course.
Thank you. Instead of, this is again just to loosen up the rules slightly, to make it easier, particularly for secondary school students. What if this motion, and it would preserve 90% of what's there, but what if this motion were to say, instead of simply schools, within 500 meters or feet of a elementary school? And that basically allows the instructors to have full access to the area around a secondary school, which again is less likely to be an issue from a safety perspective and more likely to be the circumstances where schools are better able to teach.
Councillor Knoll, I believe if you look closely, you'll see Councillor Adams writing that word in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I moved.
So we all understand the vote?
And the ventriloquism.
And the ventriloquism. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that does carry. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution to that. The next item is the discussion item number 1, which is meant to be a fairly routine matter. It's the annual council appointments to various boards and committees. Councillor Elgar?
I will move the staff recommendation with one exception, and it has to do with the Councillor Robinson swapping for, his name goes in instead of our other Ward 5 councillor over there, Councillor Grant.
And thank you, Councillor Grant, for volunteering to step aside for Councillor Robinson. We all know how deeply important this committee is to Councillor Robinson's happiness. The seconder, Councillor Dudek. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Now, that brings us to the council vacancy report. And here we have a recommendation that and this is kind of required, so it's not that optional, that the office of Ward 2 Town Councillor, formerly held by Pam Demoff, be declared vacant in accordance with Section 262, Sub 1 of the Municipal Act 2001. Second, that a bylaw requiring that the Ward 2 Town Council vacancy be filled by way be filled by way of a by-election be brought forward to a special council meeting called for that purpose on January 11th, 2016, and the special meeting of council makes it possible for voting day to then be declared for Monday, April 11th. The clerks, as they explain in the report, have worked hard to avoid having any of the key dates in the election process fall on a holiday or during March break and so on. And so even though we could go all the way to April 18th, just 7 days later, it appears to me, as I'm reading the report, that this is the best that can be done in terms of avoiding unfortunate intersections with important dates. Councillor Duddick?
I'd be pleased to move it, Your Worship.
Councillor O'Meara? Seconded. Discussion. Councillor Lapworth?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The last 2 or 3 elections, we've had problems in some cases installing our signs because of the ground being hard. And I was wondering if, in fact, the frost will be out of the ground by April the 11th.
Well, as you know, there's very few places you can put signs anymore. Councillor Elgar?
I just wonder when Groundhog Day is for Councillor Lapworth.
February 2nd.
So the good news is we won't be doing it in February. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That.
This is a little hat for the staff.
Well, you know, it's starting to look like by-elections are us. Councillor Duddick.
Yes. Will there be something put on our website in regards to that? Because as you can appreciate, not only myself, but other members of council have been getting inquiries, shall we say, in regards to the timing, what can and cannot be done. So if they refer them to our good friend.
We will spare no effort to ensure that every single eligible elector knows about the by-election. And I remind you that our successful motto at YTV was promote, promote, promote. And we will promote, promote, promote this by-election. Councillor Knoll?
I just wanted to ask for clarification, mostly for the at least half dozen people I know that are watching, waiting for this decision tonight on Town TV. I know there's some people in the audience as well. I just want clarification because I've been asked this question, and I apologize if this was just discussed and I might have missed it, but can the clerk's staff or somebody clarify that after, when people can actually formally start to register, not the nomination date, but the registration date? Because that's the number one question that I'm getting from people that are interested is when can you actually register? I don't see it actually identified in the report unless I missed it, and I apologize if I did.
So nomination day on, okay, everybody ready? I'm going to read you from the report that nomination day would be Friday, February 26th, 2016. So nomination period begins January 12th and concludes February 26th, 2016 in the recommendation that we just passed.
So January 12th would be the first day you could register?
You can begin registering on the 12th of January.
Because last time when we had the Ward 6 one, it was literally the day after that people started registering. So I just want to be, just for the sake of clarity, I want to make sure that we are totally on top of that.
So everyone now knows we are on top of that. So thank you very much. There are no, we've come near the end, ladies and gentlemen. There are no confidential discussion items. There are no advisory committee minutes listed for this agenda. Yes. I'm getting there. So, Council, if you will turn to your addendum, you'll see a confidential discussion item, C1, personal matter about identifying an individual. And before we go there, I thought it would be a brilliant idea to make sure that we'd covered off every other thing of a public nature so that no member of the public would be inconvenienced by, and have to hang around to come back to see if we had any more to do. So with your permission, I would call the question, are there any items for new business? Notices of motion, emergency, congratulatory, or condolence? And there is, I have one, and Councillor Duddick, you have another one? Yes. Thank you.
I would just like to offer my congratulations to my dear friend and colleague, past colleague, Councillor Pam DeMoff, who is now officially an MP, having been sworn in this past weekend, and I understand as did John Oliver. So congratulations to them both.
Well done, Councillor. I know we all join in that note. Any others? Councillor, yes, we're going there now. Ready? Okay. So, Council, I have a notice of motion as opposed to a proclamation or some other form of statement so that every member of council can participate in this if you wish. And to do this tonight, which would be timely, we need to waive the provision of the procedure bylaw to permit this to come for a vote. What is it? And it's the notice of motion that's on your desk concerning the attack in Paris and Beirut. And I see hands from Councillor Lischina and Councillor Grant for the waiving of the procedure bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed? No one. That's carried. So this is moved by me and seconded by Councillor Adams, who I credit for he was the first one to say that we ought to do this. And this is a condemnation of violent attacks overseas. Whereas violent and deadly attacks took place on Thursday, November 12, 2015 in Beirut, Lebanon, and on Friday, November 13, 2015 in Paris, France. And whereas these attacks killed 43 civilians and wounded 239 civilians in Beirut, and killed 129 civilians and wounded 352 civilians in Paris. And whereas as Canadians, we come together during times of distress to offer support and help raise awareness of issues of injustice. And whereas France, as one of our NATO allies and as a nation with whom Canada has deep cultural connections, especially with our Francophone community, was affected during these attacks. Therefore, the Council of Town of Oakville condemns these acts of violence and shows Oakville's concern and sympathy for the victims of these violent attacks by circulating this motion to the federal government of Canada and other appropriate authorities and organizations. And I would ask for your unanimous support. And Councillor Adams, did you want to speak to it?
I think it says it all, and I'd ask that we have a recorded vote to show our support for it. Clearly, everybody was shocked by these events, and they absolutely need to be condemned.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there other speakers? Shall I put the vote? All in favor should stand to be recognized by name. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Duddick, and Councillor O'Meara. I declare the motion carried unanimously. I don't believe there are any regional reports or questions regarding town boards and advisory committees, and accordingly, I need a motion and a second to move into a session closed to the public for the purpose of considering a personal matter about identifying an individual under the provisions of Municipal Act. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Hutchins, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. With that, we'll excuse the public, and thank you very much for your interest tonight. And Madam Clerk, would you set up the chamber for a closed session? And Council, would you like a 2-minute bio break at this point? We have a break. Has been in this session closed to the public for the purpose of receiving information about a personal matter about identifying individuals, which is one of the permitted uses of closed session of the Municipal Act. And I would now ask for a mover and seconder to receive the information provided in that session. I saw Councillor Duddick's hand and Councillor Hutchins' hand. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Council, are there any requests for reports? None. Council, we need a mover and seconder for